Hello, everybody. This is Carl Quinton, your host for Meet the Devs. This is episode number 7, and today I have here with me Chris Natsuume. Chris, welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going great. So, Chris is probably one of my favorite people to talk to in all my years in working in with game developers. He's highly entertaining. Is not afraid to tell people what he thinks, and has some pretty famous quotes out there in the speaking circuit of the video game industry. Is that
Yeah,
about right?
I have always struggled with the idea that like I get a lot of opportunities to talk, and I think it's because I'm not afraid to use a lot of cuss words, and not because I actually have any real content to give. And I've really wondered like how many people have been to like 20 of my lectures and been like, I've been to a lot of these lectures and I've never learned anything. I'm certain that's happened. I'm sure that's a thing. But they keep asking me to come because they're fun. So.
Yeah, and it's fun to have you. So, normally I start off the show with, well, who's Chris? But I think most people who might be watching this know who you are. But you've been in game dev forever. You started with what, Far Cry and all that stuff, and
Oh goodness, Far Cry was mid-career for me. I started games in 1992, I think. 90 No, that's not right. 94. I started games in 94 I made one of the first Doom clones. It was a first-person shooter called The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki.
nice.
And I was a level designer for that I think that shipped in 90, I want to say 94-ish, something like that. And so I've been making games pretty much full on since then. To put a time on that game actually was made, it predated Windows. We actually made it on DOS. And it shipped on 5.25-inch floppy disks.
That's like King
that'll
Quest
put a date on
era.
it.
I remember playing games on old floppy disks. Back in King's
Yeah.
Quest time. Sierra Online stuff, which happens to be the first place Jessica worked. But anyway,
No,
tangent
that
there.
was back. I mean, you think it's so funny to talk about people and the kind of tools and stuff that we have for making games now. When I made that game, our editing tool was literally like a DOS prompt, and I would type in I had this crappy little editor that the programmer had made, where you actually you graphed out your level on a piece of graph paper,
Uh-huh.
and you had to sit with a calculator and do the math and figure out, like, if I draw a line from this point to that point, I know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, so it's going to be actually this many pixels, and you had to figure that out in a calculator.
Right.
And then you would type in from point so and so to point so and so, draw a line, whatever, put x number of textures on it, and you would just have to, like, and then you would look at your level and you'd be like, somewhere in here I got like one number wrong, and there's some piece of wall that goes straight through, and it was the most annoying job I ever had. That was my first time I ever made anything.
Well, and then you
Uh,
had memory problems too, because the machines back then didn't have enough memory to
oh,
do jack and shit.
couldn't do it. I think we had a limit of. I mean, it was so fun. I don't remember exactly what the exact limits were, but I remember we had, I think, 25 textures we were allowed for the walls. That was it. You got 25 textures, and everything had to be textured from those 25 textures. And so we had, like, this is the wall that looks like stone. This is the wall that looks like bamboo.
Yep,
And
yep.
that was all you had. You didn't get like, oh, this is the niche with the what. It was a totally different world, and it wasn't even really 3D. It was a 2.5D game, I think is what they used to call it. So there was a floor and there was a ceiling,
Yep.
and then you were allowed to make like a little maze in between. But the floor could never rise or lower because the computer had no understanding of anything being up or down. There was
Right.
no up
That
or down.
that
It was
Z
actually in
coordinate
2D.
didn't really exist. Yeah. So, yeah, you've been doing
Yeah,
this for
I'm old, is what we're getting at here. I'm very old.
well, I'm pretty sure we're almost exactly the same age. But in any case, we're both old then.
Yes.
So after kind of working in hardish core games and stuff, you met Alan. How did Boon Zap come about? That's a question I've always never gotten around to.
So I used to work at a game studio in Scotland called Viz, and they were famous for making a game called State of Emergency, where it was right when sandbox games had just become a thing. It was when the first GTA had just come out, and everybody wanted to make these big sandbox games. And it was a sandbox game where you were like in a city and you ran around the city and incited a mob to riot and you tried to trash the town. That's what the company was famous for. I didn't work on that game. I actually was hired to work on a different game that they made called Brave. It was a platform jumper game. And I actually was there when Alan got hired for his very first job, was working at that studio as a programmer straight out of college. And I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, that studio had issues. It was not the healthiest environment in the world.
A video game studio has issues? I've never heard such a thing.
Yeah, this one was particularly bad.
Oh, this was even better. Okay.
This was even within the context of video game studios, this one had issues.
Okay.
And Alan and I used to go out after work and this is one of the issues of the studio, was that the studio drank hard. Like every day at 5 o'clock, the whole studio got up, went to the pub, and drank themselves into a stupor. And Alan and I joined in on that fine tradition. And we used to sit at the pub and we would talk crap about how someday we were going to start a studio and we were going to do it better than this, you know. And we were young then. This was in 99 or something like that. It was quite a while ago. And, you know, back then we had no idea what it took to run a studio or anything like that. But we thought, hey, we could do, you know, if these guys could do it, we could obviously do it. So we used to have all these dreams of how we were going to run a studio. And then after that, we kind of, you know, I left that studio. Alan stuck around for a couple more months and then he left the studio. I went to actually Salt Lake City, where close to where you are, and worked a game studio in Salt Lake for a couple years. And then I ended up going to Germany and worked for Crytek and made Far Cry. And during that time, Alan had fallen in love with a young Singaporean lady that he had met in Edinburgh. And so she got her degree and went back to Scotland, or went back to Singapore, and he was just heartbroken. He didn't know what to do with himself. And so he actually moved down to Southeast Asia to be with this young woman. He first worked in Kuala Lumpur, and then because that was the best job he could get in Southeast Asia. He couldn't get a job in Singapore.
Right.
But he got one in KL, which was like a 5-hour bus ride away. So he used to take the bus down to Singapore every weekend to go hang out with this woman. Oh, yeah, he was absolutely dedicated. Ends up, he gets married. They've been happily married now for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, something like that. But he ended up in Singapore. So at some point, I decided I wanted to make a company. And when I wanted to make a company, the first thing I needed was a programmer. And I remembered those discussions that Alan and I had back in Scotland. So I called up Alan and I said, hey, let's do this thing. Let's start a company.
Yeah.
And he was like, great, let's do it. Just move down to Singapore. And I'm like, no. You're going to move up to Seattle. And we got we couldn't decide who was going to move where. And we said, all right, fine. Let's just stay where we are and we'll get it started kind of in a virtual way. And if that works out, then we'll figure out who moves where. And so we started as a virtual studio in Singapore and Seattle. I had just finished business school in Seattle at the time. And we needed an artist. And there was an artist that he had worked with in KL, Kuala Lumpur, when he'd been down there. So we were like, okay, you need to move to Singapore. And he was like, nah, I'm not going there. And so we ended up being a virtual studio with people in 3 cities. And even at the time, we were like, yeah, at some point we're gonna move everyone into the same city. But we kept collecting people, and we never really found a reason to move them all anywhere. And we ended up being, I think, one of the largest virtual studios in the game industry. We got up to 90 people at one point.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, it was 97 people in, I think at the time, 17 different cities.
That's a lot of people. And that was coming into the next thing I wanted to talk about was your remote offices and stuff like that, because Alan's still based in Singapore. You're based in Japan. You have Filipinos. You have, people all around Southeast Asia. But I think you're fairly focused on a similar time zone of Southeast Asia at this point. Is that correct?
It's a couple different things. Obviously, being in the same or similar time zone is good. Tokyo's 1 hour before Manila, and Manila and Singapore are on the same time zone. So most of our studios within an hour or two. We actually have some people in Russia, Ukraine. We have actually somebody in Qatar now, of all people, or all places. So we do work with different time zones. It's better when we don't, but it's not really the time zones that drives us, to be honest. As the company got bigger, I realized that we were doing this really interesting thing, which was we were giving opportunity to places that don't usually have that opportunity. And so it's not just that we're in the Philippines. We're in, we have people we have a guy down in Davao. We had people in Iloilo. In Indonesia, we've got people in Surabaya, and we've got 2 people out in Sumatra. There's no game industry in Sumatra, right? And so when you take, one of our staff in Sumatra, they really have two choices, right? They can either pack up all their stuff, leave their family, leave everything they know, and move to a city like Singapore or Jakarta or Manila that has a game industry,
Yep.
where the prices are going to be really high and the rent's going to be really high, and most importantly, they're leaving everything they know behind. They can't take care of their families, they can't do the stuff that they need to do in their personal lives, or they could not work in games. Those are kind of their two choices, and so we offer those people a third choice, which is, hey, you could stay at home in wherever, Surabaya or Iloilo, and you can still work in games. And that's a choice that a lot of people don't get. And once we started doing that, I realized that this was actually, it's more than just sort of a game company. It's kind of an opportunity for people in these places that they don't have otherwise. And when I do some work with charity and whatnot, but I'm not a big fan of charity in general. I'm much more a fan of bringing actual work to somewhere, because people don't want charity, people want work, right?
Direct action instead of indirect charity or whatever.
And obviously, the people that we hire are college educated. They're the upper levels of the societies that we work in. If you look at a country like the Philippines or the Indonesia, the people that we're hiring, we're obviously not doing them any huge favors. These are people that we're going to find jobs anyway. They're college educated, computer literate people. But when you say that I'm going to take this college-educated, computer-literate person and let them stay in Sumatra instead of be part of the brain drain of dragging that person to Singapore, then what you mean is you're actually letting that person stay at home and be part of that local economy. And while I'm not paying, the lower rungs of society in Sumatra, the people I'm paying are, right? The person that I work with in Sumatra, they go to the coffee shops in their hometown and they patronize, the businesses in their hometown. Right. And so that money is actually going to the Sumatran economy as opposed to going to the Singapore economy or the London or New York economy.
And those people, they probably have better, kind of life-work balance and stuff too, because they're not moving to the city away from all that stuff, and they're probably going to be more effective in that type of environment too. So there's
and their money's worth a heck of a lot more. They live better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I were to take most of my staff and pay them the same amount that I'm paying them and move them to Singapore, they could survive. But they would probably have to share a house with somebody. They wouldn't go out nearly as often. But you take some of the people that we hire that are living, in small towns in the Philippines, they live very, very well out there. And so, and they have, one of the things that people don't really understand about Southeast Asian culture is when somebody in the family does well, the whole family does well.
Yeah, it's
right?
shared.
There's a lot of shared wealth amongst the community down there, especially within your family. And so a lot of the people that we're hiring, even though, they may only be 25 years old, they're the major breadwinner for a large extended family. And, they're helping out. They're helping put their kids through, not their cousins or whatever, their nieces through school and that sort of thing. And so I'm actually, I went to a convention in Austin once, and I had some lady get up in the middle. It was a convention on outsourcing, and I had some lady get up in the middle of the thing, and she was just outraged, and she pointed at me with the finger of fury. How can you take jobs from good, clean Americans? You should be ashamed of yourself. And she went off on me. And at the time, I didn't have a real erudite response to it, and I'm sad about that now. But this is my response to that, right? Sure, it would be nice to bring jobs to Austin or Dallas, but I actually think in terms of the greater happiness principle, we bring more happiness or more wealth to the world by putting that wealth in a place like Davao or Banda Aceh than we would putting that wealth in San Francisco. That's my feeling on the matter. And from a what am I doing with my life and what am I building and what am I going to feel when I'm 50 years old and did I do good things for the world? I actually feel pretty good about running a game studio that's predominantly located in the developing world. I think that's a good thing for a man to do with his life, personally.
Yeah. And I
know that was a really long-winded response, but
we expect nothing less from you, Chris. That's your mantra, so it's all good.
True.
It's good. So I wanted to talk about live streaming for a bit. You and I have had a few conversations about live streaming and the benefits and lack of benefits and stuff. So where do you currently sit with your opinion on live streaming? Is it something that each studio needs to take on themselves? Do you need to hire marketing people? Do you what is the benefit of live streaming right now for a game company?
You know, I was actually talking in my stream. I do a weekly live stream, and we do a dev live stream. And so what I do is once a week, I basically have a meeting where you see the banner behind me, which I swear I didn't put that there on purpose. That's where it actually lives. I'm putting a game called Last Regiment together. And so once a week, we'll do a dev live stream where we'll bring the designers and the artists in, and we'll play a game of what we're building, and we'll stream that, and I'll talk about here's what we did last week and all that other stuff. And it's been really fascinating. It's been really fun. We did a game called Legends of Kalasia, and I started doing it on Legends of Kalasia. And what I found was there was this really powerful thing that we did where we put the game in early access at the same time as we started live streaming it. When we did that, we had this great sort of excuse to talk about our early access game on live stream, but also we had people who could actually put their hands into the game and play the game. And so I would actually play multiplayer games versus our users in the early access game live on stream. And so there's not a better way to get feedback, right?
Yeah.
And,
so real quick, Chris, somebody's asking where they can watch your dev stream.
It's at the Boomzap official it's on Twitch, just Twitch, Boomzap official. You can see it there. So that's where we do that. I just got back from ESGS, which is a big consumer convention in the Philippines. And honestly, the biggest value of going to these conventions is the ability to watch somebody play your game over and over and over again. If you're going to a consumer convention, not a B2B convention. Or for that matter, if you were to go to Casual Connect and be part of the Indie Prize, one of the big values of Indie Prize is to sit there and watch a bunch of people play your game, right?
Right.
And for me, the live streaming is a way to get that experience much earlier and much more frequently. So once I put a game in early access and people have access to the game, I actually have the ability to watch people play my game, have people watch me play my game, respond directly to me while I'm doing that during development. And that's probably been the most powerful tool I've ever found for
So a final
games.
QA and refinement kind of touch to the game.
That's what it was for Kalasia. For Last Regiment, I said, you know what? Let's start it earlier. Let's as an experiment. Let's see what happens if we do that all the way up in we've been live streaming since we had an early prototype, and I would say it was a different experience that way. It's been less about watching people play, because right now nobody can play but me. All they can do is watch me play because I don't have a version for them to play yet.
Right.
But having them watch me play and explain, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not doing, has been a really great way for people to be like, you know what, that thing that you're doing, I don't really like that. Or, oh, that thing that you just added last week, that's really cool. Could you do this and this and this and this? And you're still deep in development. You can still make those choices, right? And when we did it with Legends of Kalasia, it was a little different because we were already so far in development that, yeah, I could do tweaks and balance issues and stuff like that, but I wasn't going to go redesign the game based on feedback from the live stream because we were way too deep into the process. But with Last Regiment, because I started it quite early, we can actually go in and be like, yeah, all right, we can try that feature, we can try that thing. But to keep it clear, both of these games were big strategy games. They had long development cycles, like 2-year development cycles. So does this work on your 5-month development cycle mobile game? I don't know. I haven't tried it, but I will say this. One of the big problems that anyone has about any games is how do you get anyone to know that it exists? I mean, this is the number one problem. Whether you're on mobile, whether you're on Steam, this discoverability issue is by far the biggest issue any game developer faces these days.
Right.
And live streaming is another path towards that. Right now, this live stream that I'm doing right now is over on, it's being hosted on our Boomzap official Twitch, which right now already has a couple users over there watching it. And those are people who are fans of Boomzap and whatnot. And so that's a way for us to talk to people in our community and sort of get our name out and get people to care about what we're doing. One of the most interesting sort of side effects of that is we've kind of developed a group of super fans that are the people that keep watching the live stream and all of that. They're really dedicated to our studio and what we do. They're great people. Shout out to all you guys. Some of you are watching right now. And when we went to PAX and wanted to display our game at PAX, instead of me bringing a whole bunch of Boom Zappers at huge cost because I have to drag them all out from Southeast Asia, I asked some of our really best fans, hey, would you be interested in working the booth? And suddenly I had our fans working our booth at PAX. And these are people that know our game really well. They love our game. They're really supportive, and it was a great deal for them. We got them some free tickets to PAX, which, they thought was really cool, and some dinners and whatnot.
Right.
But instead of having, booth babes in our booth, or someone that we had to rent locally, people who don't care about our product, we had super fans in our booth trying to get people to buy our game. This was huge. You can't buy marketing like that.
No,
and so
I mean,
these are the kind of things that come from really getting involved with your community like that.
It's a belief in your product, and you can't buy a belief in your product. I mean, having somebody there that just feels genuinely great about your product, being there telling other people about it. I mean, how can you ask for more than that? I mean, that's amazing. That's great.
The whole thing didn't actually start as a marketing effort for me. It started because I wanted to understand, obviously having your game be live streamed by somebody is a big thing right now. Mm-hmm. And planning during your development, obviously Luke and Yulia, the guys that do, they started Tiny Build. They're probably some of the best people in the industry right now for really using Twitch and getting the developers that they work with to integrate, Twitch features into their game. I think they're one of the sort of groundbreakers in that industry. But there's other people that are doing it well. Mm-hmm. The guys that did Cluster Truck, for instance. Everyone knows that really famous event where somebody was streaming Cluster Truck, and while they were streaming Cluster Truck, the developers of Cluster Truck had a special secret feature where they could come into the stream and alter the gameplay. And it was a big event, and it was something new, and it was something interesting. Again, to discoverability, having people live stream your game is critical. And I realized that, but I didn't know anything about live streaming. I'm a stupid old man, and I don't watch live streams. And so I have a public relations marketing person in the studio, Monica, and my initial response was like, I'll get Monica to figure this out for me. Mm-hmm. But then I realized, like, you can't always just have somebody do all the mental work for you. If you want to really understand something, you got to get involved. And so part of why I started live streaming was just I wanted to live stream. Mm-hmm. I wanted to know what life as a live streamer was like. And it's funny because I've actually kind of enjoyed it. I've enjoyed live streaming and getting involved in the community, and I've actually made friends out there in the live stream community that, beyond the business and the whatnot of the video game studio. I've just met some cool people mm-hmm. who live stream, and it's been a really different experience. And I don't know, is it important? For me, it has been. It depends on the game. If you're making another Match 3 that's designed to be a mass market game for old ladies, I don't know if they watch Twitch or not, right? But if you're making the next big indie hit, I don't know why you're not involved in Twitch. This is your marketing front. It depends.
Have you seen what Amazon did? They tried to do an esports style Match 3s and other types of casual titles competition with some streamers that do those types of games. And
how'd that go?
Well, they put a lot of money into it, and it had a great production value and everything, but I never saw the metrics on it. And I didn't even know about it until I was in the Amazon offices talking to them. They're like, well, didn't you see? And I'm like, no. And I felt kind of bad.
Here's the thing about live streaming is you got to be legit. You got to be, you can't fake this, right? It's a millennial art. And the millennials, if they know anything, they can smell being marketed to from a mile away. They've been marketed to since they were like in the cradle, right?
Yeah.
They know. You can't fool them, right? And so you have to be legit. You have to be upfront about things. And so one of the things that we've tried to do when we do our live streams and stuff is, you can see I don't have anything special behind me. I have a green screen that I can put down sometimes, but we don't put a huge amount of production value and stuff in it because I don't know that looking really polished and professional helps you in the live stream world. I mean, if you look at some of the most popular live streamers, you can see like their bed and their dirty clothes behind them. It's all about being real for them. And so we try to be real. I cuss on live stream. I talk about my family. I talk about my bullshit. I talk about what's going on in my life, not just what I'm doing in the game development world. I actually know the people that come to the live stream. I go to their live streams and contribute in their live streams. And I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I genuinely enjoy these people. They're nice people. And they can smell that. They get, oh, well, Chris is legit. This isn't bullshit.
Oh,
So
so
it's
I have
there's
to
that.
I have to tell you one of the comments in Twitch right now. So Renegade Pig says, "I'm late because Chris is too challenged to do an at everyone."
Yeah, so Renegade Pies, for instance, that's one of the people that shows up to our live stream quite frequently, right? And he's actually a live streamer himself, and that's part of the live stream thing. Is there's a community, and people who live stream support other people who live stream. And you've been doing this for a while now, Carl.
Yeah.
One thing that people who don't live stream don't get is it's actually quite hard. You look at it and you think like, and especially you watch like, some person just playing Overwatch and you're like, dude, I can play Overwatch, but actually playing a video game and filling time with interesting stuff. And live streamers don't stream. Your live streams are pretty short. Real live streamers, by live streamers that do live streaming as their thing, they're like 4 hours long, and they do that like 4 or 5 times a week. So imagine every week trying to be interesting for 20 hours. That's
really hard.
And not just that, trying to be interesting while you're playing a video game. I mean, you played video games.
Well,
you're playing. And you're like, leave me alone, man. I'm almost at the last. No, you can't say leave me
well,
alone.
and you gotta pay attention to chat too while you're playing this video game that's really hard, and then you're fighting the boss, and you get somebody who does a donation, and you don't want to ignore him, but you're fighting the boss, and
I've got people over in my chat right now. They're like, those are rookie numbers, Chris. You got to get your numbers up. I mean, even 4 hours. They're like, 4 hours.
That's exactly what come up. 4 hours. Those are scrub numbers, Chris.
Yeah, I got people like, 4 hours is minimum, absolute minimum, and that's the reality of streaming. And people who watch stream, they don't get how challenging that is. And there's the other challenge to it, which is nobody starts a live stream with a big audience, right? Everybody starts a live stream with nobody. And I've done it. I've been sitting and talking, and I actually have a real advantage that I have a marketing manager and a game studio. So there's always somebody watching my live streams because I literally pay them to, right? Literally, there are people that work for me that I go to my in-house chat and I'm like, all right, dudes, I'm live streaming. Somebody come watch this, right? So I at least have a couple people in my live stream all the time, literally because I pay them to be there. Real streamers don't get that, right?
Right.
And so
maybe their mom.
They're even their mom can't put in 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, right? Your mom doesn't love you that much. And so, you have to power through that period as a live streamer where you literally have an audience of zero. There are a lot of people out there that have sat and talked to nobody.
Yeah.
And you can't not do it, because if you say, well, there's nobody here, I quit, then you never have you never get to the point where you have somebody. So when that one person shows up at your live stream, you have to be talking like you give a fuck, even when there's literally nobody there. And if you have not done this, you don't know what an ego-crushing, painful, humiliating experience.
It's like that time you got rejected for a date in high school, and
it's the worst. It's the absolute worst. And I've got people around chat that are saying, okay, so there's one streamer, Alara Shade, who's one of the supporters of our studio. Really, really wonderful person, really wonderful streamer.
Yeah.
And she streams 9 hours a day, right? And keep in mind, when she's streaming 9 hours a day, there's work that comes before and after the stream too, because you can't just stream, right? After you stream, you got to take the best of and make your best of loop. You got to make your YouTube videos out of it. There's all this post-production.
Well, yeah, and you got to Twitch before, or tweet that you're going live, and you got to Facebook post, and you got to, there's all the pre and post work for both sides of it, I mean, just for this stream, I spent about a half hour, 45 minutes making sure all my tech works and everything else, and posting about it and getting ready and doing all that stuff. I mean, and I don't have near the skills that these guys have honed over, months and months of doing it. It's really hard to describe to somebody who's not involved in marketing an indie game right now. A lot of people who work in the game industry, they work at a big studio like Blizzard or something like that, and they have a marketing department that does their marketing, and the marketing department has money and they can throw money at these problems. If you're an indie dev, you don't have any of that. And so marketing is half of your job. But making your game at this point is only less than half grassroots marketing, right? It's all grassroots.
And it's at the point now where you have to not just market, you have to market your marketing. You're like, okay, I'm going to use my live stream as a marketing channel for my game. Well, how do I get people to come to my live stream? Oh, okay. Well, I need to get a Twitter up and do that. Okay, now how do I get people to come to my Twitter? And you're literally making marketing assets to market your Twitter, which only exists to market your live stream, which only exists to market your game. You're making marketing for marketing for marketing. Yep. And it's how deep does this rabbit hole go? And you realize that in a 40, and God knows I don't work 40-hour weeks, in a 60, 70-hour week, more than half of that is spent on dealing with marketing and all of this, I'm lucky enough to have a big enough studio where I have, Monica, who's my marketing person. I have a full-time person that does nothing but think about this stuff and put together these assets and put together these what are we tweeting this week? What's going on Facebook this week? And she makes little posts and all that other stuff. For a little, 2 or 3 person indie studio, I don't know how they do that. I mean, it's really, really challenging.
Yeah. And, the rabbit hole just seems to get deeper year over year is what it seems like to me. But
it's hard. I mean, and the thing is, it's not just I said this before. It's not just games, right? Mm-hmm. When you think about one of our users, I take one of the guys who plays one of our games, right? He doesn't just have Steam, right? And in Steam, he has more games that he could play in 10 lifetimes available to him right there. Most of them cheap or free, right?
Yeah.
But he's also got Netflix. And so for $6 a month, he's got more movies and TV shows than he could watch in 10 lifetimes.
Yeah.
Right. And if he doesn't want to watch Netflix or play video games off of Steam, he's got an iPhone, which again, 200 new games a fucking day on the iPhone. Right. And if he doesn't want to watch any of that, well, he's got YouTube, which is literally more content than the entire world could watch there must literally be billions of hours of content on YouTube.
I can't even imagine how many hours of content are on YouTube. I mean, it would be interesting to know at some point.
And if all of that isn't enough to keep him amused, he's got live streaming. And, how many live stream channels are up right now? There's probably 20 girls eating noodles and talking about their boyfriends that they can watch on Twitch right now. Just that subcategory alone of Asian girls eating noodles and talking about stuff. That alone, there's probably 20 choices available at this moment right now.
Right.
And so as a game developer, you have to take all of that and say, okay, you're not going to do any of that for this amount of time, and you're going to play my thing. And that's it's a really, really hard.
We got our first fuck on TV.
I don't know any word to explain it other than that. I mean, you just bang your head into this and just say how do I get anyone to give a crap about what I'm doing versus all of that? I mean, you're not just competing against other indie devs. You're competing against Game of Thrones. You're competing against PewDiePie, if he still exists. Competing against all. Did he turn into a Nazi, or is he still a thing?
He got a little flack for it, but he's still on track pretty well. He's still doing all right.
I don't know. I remember the Nazi thing, and then I tuned out. But I mean, you're competing. I mean, if you're a live streamer, you're competing against that, right? And especially on Twitch, like I say, Alara Shade, a very good streamer, she streams 9 hours a day, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're an Alara Shade fan, you're already dedicating how much of your time to Alara Shade, right? So if you want to go to some other streamer, where are you finding? There's only 24 hours in a day. You got to sleep, right? So it's really hard. It's really, really hard when everybody's an entertainer to get somebody to pay for your entertainment.
Well, the Twitch chat is just cracking me up right now, You're going to be competing against Lord of the Rings. How's that make you feel, Chris?
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
It's so sad. Every time I hear about a new movie or a new project, I'm not happy anymore. I'm just like, now I got to compete against that. Now that's something else they're going to pay for that's not me. And it's really frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about Last Regiment.
So it's a strategy game. It's basically we did Legends of Kalasia, which was our last strategy game, and it was a new thing for a studio. Most people know Boom Zap as a hidden object studio. That's what we're kind of famous for. We did a bunch of hidden object games for Big Fish and casual games and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I've always been a strategy game player. That's what I play for fun. And at some point, we just put our foot down and said, we've been running this game studio for 10 years, and we've never made the kind of games that we actually play. We should do that thing. And so we we made Legends of Kalasia, which was my first strategy game. It was good. It was critically well reviewed. People loved it. We had a bunch of fans. Financially, it did okay. Didn't make us a lot of money. Didn't lose us a lot of money. It was okay. But when we got to the end of the process, I was like, there's a lot of stuff I would have done different if I were to make a strategy game today. And we talked about maybe we should do a Legends of Kalasia 2 or whatnot. And I said, you know what? Let's just start over from scratch. Let's make our next strategy franchise with all the stuff that we've learned from the last strategy game. And that's Last Regiment. It's a turn-based strategy game. One of the, with some of the great stuff from Kalasia we kept, like it's a simultaneous turn-based strategy game. So usually in a strategy game, it's like, you take a turn, you take a turn, you take a turn. That's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It takes forever, right? So what we do is everybody plans their turn at the same time, and then they all resolve at the same time. And it's actually really fun because one thing, the game goes a lot faster. But the other thing is, I actually don't know what you're going to do until I've already committed to what I'm going to do. And so a lot of the game is actually looking at the sort of tactical situation and saying, I think he's going to move there and I think he's going to build that. And if he does that, the best thing for me to do is this, this, and this. You set all that up, then you push the go button, and then you find out, oh, he totally didn't do what I thought he was going to do, and now all my moves are wrong. And so there's kind of a deeper bit of thought behind it. It's actually very fun. And we did that in Legends of Kalasia. That part of Legends of Kalasia was great.
Right.
But we've sort of redone a bunch of other stuff that wasn't so great about Kalasia, like the way combat actually works and stuff like that, which I could get into detail, but I don't think anyone cares in this live stream. But the big thing that we changed was when we did Legends of Kalasia, I operated under the assumption that in a multiplayer first strategy game, nobody cared about the lore, nobody cared about the world. They just wanted some units that looked pretty and they'd make them fight. And so we made that. And when we made it, everybody was like, tell me about the lore, tell me about your world, tell me about these characters. And I was like, I didn't think you cared a bit about that. So oh, you like dwarves? Yeah, we got dwarves. There's a dwarven kingdom. Yeah, sure, whatever. Like I was making it up as I went along, and it comes across a little bit like that. And so we started from the very beginning building a very complicated world and building, a history. And the other thing that we learned about strategy games was if you make your strategy game multiplayer centric, you have a huge risk right from the very beginning because
there might
you
not
have
be
to
somebody
develop
else there.
some people there to play.
Yeah.
And if you don't have anyone there to play, when they come to play, there's no one to play, and they don't stick around because there's no one to play. It's a loop, right?
Right.
And so we realized that we had not spent nearly enough time on the single player game and making sure that people have a great single player experience so that they're in the game playing the single player game and have something to do while they wait for somebody to show up for multiplayer so that they would stick around and keep playing our game and they would be there later. So Last Regiment is a much more single-player centric game. We're spending a lot more time on the single-player campaigns and the single-player missions because we realized in a strategy game you have to do that unless you happen to have some sort of huge license or something like that where you're guaranteed some sort of minimum bulk audience. So,
right, some sort of IP that draws in existing fan base that gets you that base for, I mean, like, I don't know where PUBG got their base, how did they suddenly, I mean, there's nothing else to PUBG besides PUBG, and how did they, I don't even know how they
some
started.
people do well, some people manage to get over that hump, and part of it is they have a good game, and I think, in all honesty, Legends of Kalasia was a slightly flawed game, and if you have a slightly flawed game, trying to build an audience for it is extremely hard. If you have a really, really strong game, then you already have a relatively sticky audience, and that sticky audience, it's with multiplayer games, failure builds on failure and success builds on success very, very quickly. I have more users, which means the community is more interesting, which means I have more users. Or I have fewer users, which means people don't stick around, which means I have fewer users. It's going to go in one of those two directions.
Yep.
And if you don't launch well and get that push early in a multiplayer game, it's just not going to happen for you, and you can't make it happen. One of the things that we actually, in Last Regiment, that we changed, and again, this was feedback that we got from Kalasia, the first thing everybody always asked in Kalasia was, can I make my own maps? And we had designed a game there where the maps were very pretty and they were built in Photoshop, and we were like, unless you've got a couple hours to spend in Photoshop and some Excel skills, you can't really build maps for this game. So we couldn't really open up the editor to them.
Right.
But with Last Regiment, we started from the very beginning, and we said, let's make sure that the map editor is something that we can release with the game, and it's very strategic, because the obvious reason that we're doing that is I want people building maps, not because I need the free content. I can make maps. That's not hard. We have more maps in Collision
It just
than
keeps
we know
players
how to do
engaged.
Exactly, it gets a certain group of people who are like, I made this map and I want people to play my map, so I'm going to go promote this game and promote this community because I want people to come enjoy the stuff that I made. And so that's been the push for us to have the editor in there. It's not really about getting free content. I can make maps. That's not hard. It's about getting that user base and getting that community built and getting people to really care about the game.
Yeah.
So
the next thing I was going to ask you about, you're a game designer. You've been doing this for a long time. You've now done 2 of your own IP strategy games. Are you going to continue down that road and continue to do your own IP? Are you going to try and license IP? Have you decided what does the future look like for Boom Zap and Chris?
Nothing has changed from, I gave this lecture at Casual Connect in, I think, I want to say Singapore years ago. And nothing has changed since then. The way that I view running an independent studio is you have to have what I call a portfolio of risk, right? If you have only indie games that you're only funding out of your own pocket, that's very, very risky. It's highly risky. Building your own IP is hard. It's expensive. That's money that you have to get from somewhere. And if you're doing it yourself, it's either coming out of your bank account or you've got to go get some VC, and now you got a VC riding you. That's a hard place to be, right? And we've never wanted to be in that place. So while we have our own IP that we're building, I actually have people in the studio right now making, I can't tell you who, but I have 2 publishers that are working with us right now. And one is on an almost entirely work for hire project where, basically there's not much back end, there's not much upside for us, but we make reasonably decent money out of the dev fees. And that's a very stable bit of business for us, right? And I know
Keeps
that if
the
we
lights
ship
on
that
business.
game in time, we're going to be marginally profitable. But there's no big back end. We'll never get rich doing that. But we'll keep the studio alive doing stuff like that. I've got another game where we're basically doing it with a partner at cost. And if we ship it, we're not going to make any money, but that deal is structured because we, brought the costs down to basically cost. That deal is structured that if that game does really well, we actually see a reasonable part of the back end. And that's a game we could actually make a lot of money on. Not as much money as something we self-owned, but I can actually build something bigger and more interesting because we've got a partner that can throw some money and some resources at it. This is a chance for us to make something that could take off and do well that we have a partner with. And then I've got a third thing, which is, Last Regiment, which we're funding entirely internally, which if it does poorly, that loss is all us. If it does well, that win is all us, right? And having that, and we've always done this. Boom Zap has always worked this way from the very beginning, that we always have that portfolio of risk. I always have a couple projects with different kinds of contracts. And so, honestly, if Last Regiment doesn't make $1, that doesn't sink my studio. Right? It sucks. It hurts. It stings. But I don't have to shut down the studio because Last Regiment didn't do well. If all of our games don't do well, over time we can't run a studio because I can't go get any more contracts. But we consistently put out relatively good product for our publishing partners, which means we can usually dig up another publishing deal, which means we can keep going. And so we're actually, I think we started the studio in 2005, which means we're about 12 years old now. And we've always operated this way. We've never taken a dime of investment. I still own half the studio. Alan still owns the other half. It's very, very rare to see an independent studio that manages to hold on to 100% ownership over 12 years, pay the staff every month, and not have a huge hit. I mean, we've never had a Clash of Clans level hit game, right?
Right. I think studios like you I can count on one hand. I think like Gogi Games, George Donovan, you guys, a few others. It's a pretty rare thing. And highly commendable.
And we all know each other.
You do all know each other, that's for sure. Speaking of, probably for a side note, but I'll just bring it up here. You should talk to Juan about the workshops we're doing at Casual Connect and the business of making games and stuff, and give a little input on that.
Talk to him about that. It sounds really interesting. I'm pretty excited about it.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm about 30 minutes longer than I was planning on going, but I kind of figured that would happen with you. So,
dude, it's live streams. We're still at the point where if we stop right now, some of my live stream audience is going to be like, Chris, you are such a wimp. I can't believe that's all you're that we're in live stream world. This is only starting. In the rest of the world, and the world of people that actually have crap to do, this is long. But in the world of Twitch, man, this is what are we at? Like 45 minutes? This
yeah, about 45 minutes, and it is absolutely nothing. But I think for my viewers on Facebook and YouTube that are all the B2B guys, this is pretty much past their attention span.
This is long for them. Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to thank you for coming on today. I've had a great time, and we'll have this posted on youtube.com/casualconnect and facebook.com/casualconnect, and it'll be on the Meet the Devs Twitch stream. So if you guys want to follow us there, we'll be doing this 3 or 4 times a week, 15 to 45 minutes now. And so thanks again, Chris. And sure. You guys have a good morning over in Japan, and we'll have a good evening over here in the United States.
Thanks, Carl.
Bye, guys.